The pandemic shut down schools around the world. And in some countries, they are now reopening. Like here in Brazil. And it's a relief for parents. I was barely able to take care of my kid, next to running the household and going to work. I didn't want to lose my job, as so many others did in the pandemic. But what about the children? Can they catch up with what they've missed? How long will classes go on for this time, or will there be new disappointment? With schools soon forced to close again as new virus variants spread. Welcome to your COVID-19 special. I'm Chris Colbert in Berlin. Summer holidays are over and school is starting again in many parts of Germany. For the second time, kids will take up their classes under the conditions of the pandemic. Many fear that this school year will be just as chaotic as the last, when homeschooling took place for weeks on end. Where does the country stand today, and have preparations been taking place over the holidays? Our reporter went to find out.
The final touch for the school opening. Here at this primary school in Schwerin in northern Germany, last preparations are underway. The decorations are ready, but other things are still a long way off. The online learning platform, for example. Here too, preparations have started, but the platform won't be ready when the students are back at school. We're looking at what is possible for now. We have formed a task group that deals with the platform intensively. They are consulting on a regular basis. They will try to answer questions like, how can we use it for our purposes? How can we make it accessible to parents as well as children? One thing is ready, the antigen rapid test. Twice a week, the children are tested for COVID-19 with the help of their teachers. Otherwise, the same measures as last year apply. For the first 2 weeks, the children will have to wear face masks in the entire school building and also during class. When they're outside, they can take them off. But we also have to air the classroom every 20 minutes, at least 3 to 5 minutes. Airing the rooms, another measure that hasn't changed since last year. Additional air filters or purification systems have not been installed. Open windows and doors ought to be enough. We have no problem whatsoever with the ventilation. The children have their jackets with them. They can take them on and off again. That's totally fine. The parents' representative disagrees. He wants air filters, especially for elementary schools. We called for purification systems 12 months ago, precisely to protect the weakest of society, those who cannot be vaccinated, children under the age of 12. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. We're exactly at the same level as last year, and that's not good. In Germany, COVID infections are rising again. Yet, everybody hopes that students will be able to come to school for as long as possible.
Let's talk more about this with David Evans. He's a senior fellow at the Center for Global Development, working on education, health, and social safety nets. Welcome to DW, David. Distance learning has surged during the pandemic. What does a successful concept for distance learning look like?
On the whole, distance learning during the pandemic has not been a great success. But if we think about successful distance learning, we have to think about what good teaching and learning look like in general. Students need interaction with skilled and motivated teachers. That's what they need when they're in school in person. And if we want any positive results from distance learning, we have to replicate those principles. Even in high-income countries, for the first months of shutdown, most education was totally asynchronous. Teachers would send some materials home and students would do the work. Over time, these high-income environments were able to move to distance learning, which much better replicated good teaching during a non-pandemic, where teachers were actually interacting with students.
So technology seems to be playing an important role here for students and teachers to communicate with each other despite not being in the same room. So one would assume that countries that can provide this technology, advanced countries, can also provide the best distance learning concept. Is that correct?
So this is absolutely true. In high-income countries, what you've seen is classes using things like Zoom and Google Classroom, where teachers are able to interact with students. In most low-income countries, what this distance learning has looked like has been much more like maybe a radio program or a television program once a day. And if you can imagine trying to learn calculus or physics from a radio show, it's just very difficult to imagine. Now, there have been some exceptions. So in a middle-income country like Botswana, teachers were called upon to call students, primary school students, to help them work through mathematics problems. And we saw significant learning gains amongst those students relative to students who didn't have access to that. So there are alternatives in places where there isn't strong internet and Zoom setups, but it is a huge challenge.
So we see all the best efforts from all sides here in order to create a learning environment for students. But still, there are studies that show remote students are more stressed than their peers in the classroom. Why is that?
So we see these students, they don't have the opportunity to interact with other students. They don't have the opportunities to relax between classes. And beyond that, what we've seen, even in high-income countries, as you say, with the best efforts, what we see is over the course of the last year with distance learning, the highest income students in high income countries haven't seen much learning loss relative to other years. But lower income students, even in high income countries where there's all this technology available, haven't had the same learning gains. We've seen significant learning loss. The reason for that is that those students, while normally they'd be in school and a teacher could help supervise and their peers could help encourage, those students are sitting at home, maybe staring at a laptop, and the students who have fewer resources often also have parents who don't have the flexibility to work from home and to provide them supervision and support to keep them focused on school during the school day.
Now, speaking of learning loss, children are missing school. In Latin America, for example, 160 days almost on average during the first year of the pandemic. What impact is this having on a generation of students?
The impact is enormous. So in some countries, the amount of schooling that students have lost amounts to a large part of the schooling that they'd be expected to receive over the course of their entire lifetime. In Chad, Sudan, South Sudan, children have lost more than 10% of all the education that they'll be expected to have over their entire lives. Now, this translates into not only a loss of learning, but a loss of incomes and a loss of opportunities for individuals and families, and in terms of economic growth looking forward.
And how are societies going to be able to offset this impact?
So there are some countries that have started to invest in bringing children back up to speed. So we have proven strategies of targeting children who've fallen behind, especially these lower income students who have had fewer resources during the pandemic. So the UK is rolling out a large-scale tutoring program. We have evidence from countries like Ghana and India from the past, from before the pandemic, that this kind of targeted tutoring, either with tutors after school or with teaching assistants during the school day, can really bring students who have fallen behind back up to speed. And we need to see this all over the world.
So face-to-face teaching is the key, be it in the classroom or remote. David Evans of the Center for Global Development, thank you for your thoughts. Time now for your questions about the coronavirus pandemic. And it's over to our science correspondent, Derek Williams.
I was vaccinated a few days ago. My arm didn't hurt and I didn't have any side effects. Is that normal?
I've talked a lot here about vaccine side effects, so it's great to hear from someone who had none, because that's actually really common. I haven't been vaccinated yet, but among friends and family who have, I'd say roughly half told me they didn't notice a thing afterwards. Although the statistics will vary from vaccine to vaccine, it looks like for most of them, at least a third of all recipients don't report even the mildest of side effects, like injection site pain or a little bit of swelling. There's no way to predict in advance exactly how you'll react, but experts say two factors clearly increase the likelihood that you'll feel some kind of discomfort after getting a shot. The first is your sex. Recent CDC data shows that around 4 out of 5 reports of COVID vaccine side effects have come from women, which doesn't come as a surprise, really, since that's also been observed in the past with many other types of vaccine. A number of biological and possibly even social reasons seem to contribute to that phenomenon. The second factor that plays a role is your age. Younger people are a lot more likely to report side effects than those over 55, which is another result backed up by experience with past vaccines. The theory there is that's because the immune response in general declines with age. So, in a nutshell, having few or no side effects after being vaccinated isn't particularly rare, and apparently even less so if you're like me, a man who's no longer a spring chicken.
And before we go, the Chinese city of Wuhan is where the pandemic began, and now the Delta variant has authorities there worried. As a result, Wuhan has launched another citywide coronavirus testing campaign after a small cluster of the variant was identified on Monday. Wuhan had previously reported no locally transmitted cases for more than a year. That's our show. Thanks for watching. See you back here tomorrow. Until then, stay safe.